rains, where does the water go? Of course, you have probably been soaked by the rain, or maybe you've watched the water run across a parking lot, or create puddles in a yard, or splash as each raindrop hits the water in a pond. These are all out in the open. But what about what happens where you can't see, in the ground under your feet? Did you know that part of the water cycle is underground?
All the water on Earth gets reused over and over and over. There's no new water. It's always the same water that's being reused again. The cycle that goes through so that we can use it again and again is called the water cycle.
After a rain shower, water will be lapped up by animals, absorbed by plants, or evaporate back into the sky. Some water will flow slowly along the surface until it reaches a pond or waterway, and some will soak into the ground and become what is called groundwater.
Groundwater is water below the surface. It comes from infiltration from rainwater and snowmelt, and it's recharged in this area easily because of the precipitation we get and because our rivers and the groundwater are so well connected.
Under the surface of the ground are layers of soil, sand, gravel, and rock. When we create gardens or plow fields, we are only seeing a tiny part of what is there. If you were to dig deep down into the soil, you would see that it has distinct layers that are often different colors and are made up of different materials. Each layer is called a soil horizon. The main soil horizons are O, A, B, and C. O is the top horizon and is made up of organic matter that is just starting to break down. The A horizon is just below that and is full of plant roots, bacteria, fungi, and invertebrates, as well as a mixture of the organic matter and the broken down mineral components like sand, silt, and clay. The next is the B horizon, which is almost entirely made up of the mineral components. Plant roots still reach down into the B horizon, but not very many. At the bottom is the C horizon. It is made up of broken pieces of parent material, which is usually gravel or solid bedrock. The water that soaks into the ground will travel down through each of these layers through the small spaces, called pore spaces, between the particles of soil, sand, and gravel. This process is called infiltration. The water will continue to travel through these pore spaces until it reaches a level where all the pore spaces are already filled with water. We call this the water table. It can also continue until it hits a soil with pore spaces so small that the water cannot travel through, such as clay or solid bedrock. Then, it will slowly fill up the area above it, as well as continue to flow through any pores in the gravel and soil, and any fractures or cracks in the bedrock. Above the water table, there will be both water and air in the pore spaces. Below, only water. Think of this area like a sponge that has been dunked into the water. All of the air has bubbled out, but the spaces in the sponge are still there, just now filled with water. The area that is filled by the water underground is called an aquifer. Sometimes water can flow freely between the surface of the ground and the water table. This is called an unconfined aquifer. Other times, the groundwater will be trapped by a layer of rock or by a type of soil like clay that doesn't let water flow through easily. The layer that has trapped the water is called an aquitard because it slows the movement of the water. The area where the water is stored and unable to move freely to the surface is called a confined aquifer. Sometimes, the layers that create a confined aquifer will intersect with the ground surface, like on a hillside. This forms an artesian well, a spring of water that will naturally flow out of the ground without being pumped. Now we know a little bit about groundwater and how surface and groundwater are connected. But did you realize that you use groundwater every day?
For drinking from the city water, they pull it up and they treat it in their facilities. If you're out in a rural area and have a private well, it's usually very slightly filtered. You pull it directly from the groundwater and it comes out the faucet. So even though it's not something we see every day, it's something all of us use every day, and we need it to stay clean so that we can continue to stay healthy.
The Miami Valley in the Dayton, Ohio region is a great example of wonderful groundwater resource with a special designation as a sole source aquifer. meaning that over 50% of the people who live on the land over the aquifer use it for drinking water. Groundwater is also widely used for irrigation in drier parts of the country.
Groundwater can become contaminated from many different places, possibly from factories or businesses that are using chemicals like paints that accidentally leak onto the ground.
Underground storage tanks made of steel or thick plastic are common for storing gasoline at gas stations and heating fuel at homes. If these tanks develop leaks, they can cause contamination in the groundwater.
So we need to make sure that things like your septic tank is properly maintained so that it doesn't leach excess chemicals or bacteria into our groundwater.
Pollution that flows above ground and reaches our rivers can threaten our groundwater as well.
If pollution were to run off the land and into the Mad River, it could potentially very quickly get into our groundwater and then down into the area where we pull up water for drinking.
Pollution that reaches our groundwater often flows with the water in what is called a pollution plume. Groundwater and the pollution plume with it often moves slowly through the pores in the soil, sand, and gravel. Many times, it is not known that pollution has occurred until much time has passed. By the time a plume is known about, it may have traveled long distances from the source of the contamination. Similar to how a drop of food color will slowly spread in a glass of water, pollution plumes will continue to spread and grow within the groundwater.
It is hard to find where they are. Once you locate them, if you can, it is very expensive to then pull that water up and treat it so that once groundwater is contaminated, it can be nearly impossible to clean it again so that we can use it for drinking.
In some cases, an aquitard will stop the pollution from reaching deeper into the ground, effectively protecting a confined aquifer located below it. The groundwater pooled from the aquifers for our use must be replenished for us to continue to have this wonderful resource. That's why it's important to conserve our water resources and use only what is needed. Aquifers can stretch for long distances and have many streams, ponds, and wells that are pulling water from them over that distance. Overuse of the water, especially in a time of drought, can affect what is available to others many miles away. In addition to conserving our groundwater, we can take active steps to help protect it.
The other things that we can do at home to prevent polluted runoff from our residential lawns and also to help conserve water for our aquifer is to install rain barrels at our spouting, and you can then use it to water your lawn. You can install a rain garden, which is a depressed, vegetated area in your lawn that will help collect rainwater instead of allowing it to flow straight to the curb and gutter and out to the storm drain. It can collect in a rain garden and then slowly flow back into the aquifer. Pervious pavers are another way to allow infiltration into our aquifer, or there's pervious concrete and pervious asphalt, and it allows water to soak through and down below parking lots, sidewalks, and roads. Instead of just running straight off, it will infiltrate or flow through that material and then get back down to our aquifer.
We have this great resource. It is so important to continue protective strategies. In the most sensitive areas, it should be groundwater-friendly businesses. We can't afford to risk our groundwater in those areas by allowing unsuitable development. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that we have into the future.
By being mindful of your water use, cleaning up potentially harmful or toxic spills right away, and not using more chemicals or fertilizers than recommended on the product label, you can help protect your groundwater. With all of us working together, we can protect and conserve this unseen but incredibly valuable natural resource.